right, folks. Thanks for hanging on to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. Also, folks, just want to let you know this episode will be edited and later published either tomorrow, I don't know, we'll see, tomorrow or Saturday on the Real Leaders Podcast channel. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you listen to a podcast, it will be on there. Hit the subscribe button, give us a review, let us know what you think, and be a part of the conversation. All right, Doc, got a question coming in from Phil Summerfield, and Phil asks, hello, Daniel. I'm an executive coach and use EI, psychometric emotions, and behaviors at work with my clients. What are your thoughts on how much and how to change our behaviors when we have self-awareness and want to change?
Oh, if you have self-awareness, that's half the battle, because the first step is always to assess what are your strengths and what are your places you could use to grow, which is where you want to aim as a coach. But if the person you're coaching has that awareness already, that's half the game, because then you want to do what's called motivational interviewing, perhaps, to find out what really gets this person going. What do they care about? And then use that to help them through the steps that it will take to improve their empathy or their self-management or goal setting, whatever you've identified as where they need to improve. So good luck.
Doc, can you elaborate on motivational interviewing a little bit for our audience?
Motivational interviewing is a actual technique which was developed for counselors, for therapists, for coaches, where you talk to the person, you keep asking questions until you really have a grasp of what they care about, what moves them, what gets them going in the morning. And then you want to link the change that they're seeking with that motivator. That's motivation.
Interesting. Yeah. Love it. Another question comes in from Iona. She asked, Dr. Daniel, what is one concrete tool for a human resources department to become more emotionally intelligent in an organization?
I recommend using for training and development the Emotional and Social Competence Inventory, the ESCI. I have to say I'm a co-developer. It's a 360. It gives people an aggregate of from people who know them well of what their abilities are, where they're strong, what they could use some growth in. And that's where you want to focus training and development, where they need to grow. So it's like going to a doctor for a physical. You get a profile of strengths and weaknesses and use that in HR for people who are going through training and development. I happen to be writing an article for Harvard Business Review about this question of how HR particularly can help an organization become emotionally intelligent. Another is to get as allies, top leaders in your organization, if you can, who will say explicitly, emotional intelligence matters here. Another is to get these so-called soft skills, emotional intelligence, as part of performance reviews. And then to promote people who have those skills because they have those skills, not just because they have a technical skill set or something like that. The higher you go in the leadership ladder, the more emotional intelligence matters in being effective. You may have started out as an engineer, but if you're a CEO, you're managing engineers, you're leading engineers. You don't need to know engineering anymore. So your cognitive skills, your IQ actually doesn't matter as much as your emotional intelligence, your ability to inspire, to guide, to direct, to influence, to empathize, to listen. All of that is emotional intelligence. So as HR, you can see if your organization will attract people with this, promote people for this, make it part of performance review, and most important, train and develop people for it. Because people may be hired for all kinds of reasons, but everyone can improve if they're motivated. So good luck on that.
And that just plays on what you were saying about emotional intelligence being a premium for this day and age with AI.
Absolutely, yes. The more jobs are taken over by robots and software called artificial intelligence, the more emotional intelligence, people skills will be of value.
Dear Faith just asked, understanding self-regulation as a component of EI, tips or tricks for how to improve this in oneself?
Self-regulation is a key skill. As I said, there are 4 domains, and that's one of the 4.
Right.
Managing, what you want to manage is 2 things. You want to cap your disturbing emotions. You can't predict when they're going to come, why they're going to come, how strong they will be. Your decision point is what you do once you're in the throes of the emotion. So the first thing is self-awareness. Realize this is what's happening to you. I'm angry now, or, oh, that feeling in my stomach, I've got butterflies, I'm anxious, whatever it may be. It turns out that if you can name an upsetting emotion, it shifts energy from the circuitry for that emotion to your verbal cortex, the part of the brain that's naming the emotion. That already starts to weaken the emotion. So you can talk to yourself, say, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling anxious. And then you can talk yourself out of it. There's no reason for me to be that angry. I'd rather be constructive and get what I want than get back at the person. That's the constructive anger. Or you can tell yourself, if you're too anxious, I'm overly anxious. I don't need to be this anxious. I could calm down. You could do that breath meditation, or no, rather, not the meditation. Do the holding the breath exercise. Right. That's what, as I said, in the Army, SEALs do that when they're about to go into something that's nerve-wracking. And it changes your physiology. This is the key. You want to change your physiology from the fight or flight response, which is what's activated when you're upset, to technically parasympathetic nervous system response, or recovery response, relaxation response. That's when you're calmer, because as you calm down, your mind gets more clear and you can deal with the situation more effectively.
Amazing. And Doc, we'll do 2 more questions. We have plenty on here.
Okay.
And just thank you everyone for asking your questions here. This one may come off the back of that last answer. This one comes from Carlos. Carlos asks, hi, doctor. I read your book 20 years ago when I was 20. Then last year, I read it again. Can you please comment about emotional hijacking? Mostly its causes and consequences.
Yeah, so emotional hijacks, I talked about earlier. It's when the amygdala, your brain's radar for threat, thinks there's an emergency now. And it may be not because, in fact, today, it's not because something's there that's going to eat us. That's very rare. It's because that guy didn't treat you fairly, or some other symbolic reality that triggers your amygdala. And when you get triggered, your emotions, your emotional circuitry takes over your thinking brain, your prefrontal cortex, the executive center. Right. So that's what's going on neurally when you get upset, and then that drives you to do something that you wish you later will wish you hadn't. The reason is that the amygdala falls back on overlearned responses. It doesn't think creatively or adeptly or agilely. It thinks, well, that worked when I was 3. I'm going to do it again, like slug this person or whatever. That's going to be something you really regret. So try not to do or say anything until you calm down. That's recovery.
It's good advice, and for folks listening to this who have not read the book, highly recommend reading it, because we didn't really dive in today about just the social impact and implications that one can have from not having a strong emotional intelligence, such as a father walking into his daughter sneaking in at night and shooting her on accident. That was one of the examples in the book.
Oh yeah, that was awful.
Many ramifications that we did not discuss today. So if you want to pick up the book, go online, search it, Emotional Intelligence.
Well, and Kevin, because you're the Real Leaders podcast, I should say, I wrote a later book called Primal Leadership, which talks about emotional intelligence and leadership. So for those of you who want to bring emotional intelligence to your leadership, in the US, it's called Primal Leadership. In other countries, it's called other things. In UK and Commonwealth, it's New Leaders. But I would recommend that to get more deeply into how to apply this in a leadership position.
That's on the queue, Doc. That's on the queue. You got the sample of it on Amazon. That'll be next. Don't worry. But it's impressive how many books you've been able to write now. It really is. And such a dire time for it as well. Now, Doc, we'll wrap up with this last question. And this is another topic I wanted to get into today, and that was flow. This comes from Raphael, and he asked, Daniel, how how do I reach flow as described by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi?
Don't try.
Yeah, I'm not.
We call him Mike
Mike.
because he has this unpronounceable Czechoslovakian name.
Yeah, I threw myself into that one.
So he talks about flow. Remember, if you've read Flow, and it sounds like you have, that flow occurs when there's a balance between the demands of the situation and the top of your skill set. But there's no predicting if you'll get into flow. But one thing that helps you get into flow is total concentration. It's an absorbed state. You're focusing 110% on the task at hand. And one of the signs of flow is that you feel it's all effortless. In fact, it turns out that masters of any domain, like chess champs, when they're at their best, use less glucose, less energy in their brain because they've got the moves down. So you can handle things really smoothly, but it takes challenging your skill set to the top and focusing completely. Those are two ingredients that might help you. No guarantee, but try it. Good luck.
Well, I'm also excited to get into the book Focus as well. I think you mentioned that example about that neurosurgeon doing surgery, and then like the roof had collapsed and they had no idea. I think that's
that's right. He was in flow. Yep.
He's in flow. Yep. He is in flow there. That's
another book, Focus. That's another aspect of all of this. Sure. Thank you, Kevin.
Well, hey, Doc, I appreciate your time coming on the Real Leaders podcast. Folks, we hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you want to listen to this episode, it will be recorded, edited, and published again to the Real Leaders podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts, it'll be on that channel. For Dr. Daniel Goleman, I'm Kevin Edwards. That's going to go out there. And always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, Doc.
Great.